Welcome back to Fusty Stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. Jessica Tyler was a kind of woman who seemed untouchable, beautiful, powerful, and admired by the entire city. The founder of Tyler Holdings, she built an empire from scratch and became one of London's most respected billionaires before the age of 35. Despite her wealth, Jessica was known for her humility and kindness. She funded orphanages, sponsored schools, and treated even her employees like family. Yet, beneath the glow of her success, she carried an emptiness money could never fill. She had everything but a heart that truly loved her. Her world revolved around endless board meetings, charity events, and photographs for business magazines that called her the Queen of Gold. What she wanted most was not another mansion or investment, but someone who would look at her not as a brand, but as a woman who desired peace, affection, and sincerity. That's when she met David Timothy, a man who changed everything. He wasn't rich nor educated beyond the basics, but he had a charm that disarmed her. He fixed her car one rainy afternoon when she was stranded on the outskirts of the city, and his calm politeness struck her more deeply than she expected. He didn't know who she was until the next day when he saw her face on a billboard, and instead of being intimidated, he treated her no differently. That rare simplicity drew her in. Against her friend's warnings, Jessica began seeing David. She told herself that perhaps love existed in simplicity. Perhaps a man without riches would love her purely. Little did she know, her heart was walking toward betrayal masked in humility. David Timothy couldn't believe his luck when Jessica agreed to marry him. He was an average man from the lower parts of London, a mechanic with greasy hands and unpaid bills. Being with Jessica gave him a life he had never dreamed of: expensive suits, lavish parties, and a wife the world admired. He enjoyed the luxury, but deep down his pride was bruised. Every time someone called him Jessica Tyler's husband, it stung like a dagger. He wanted to be more than her shadow, to have control, to be the one others respected. Yet he smiled, pretending gratitude while secretly burning with envy. In his mind, he convinced himself that he deserved a share of her empire, that it wasn't fair she had everything while he had nothing before her. Jessica, in her innocence, never noticed the growing bitterness behind his smiles. She adored him, gave him everything he asked for, and even placed him on the company's board just to make him feel included. But power changes people, especially those who never had it. Slowly, David stopped being the gentleman she met and became someone she couldn't recognize. He started staying out late, blaming business meetings that didn't exist. Jessica, blinded by love, told herself it was stress. But deep inside, her instincts whispered that her world, once built on trust, was starting to tremble. Susan Mendez entered David's life like a storm in spring, beautiful, sharp, and cunning. She was a con artist who knew exactly what men like David craved: validation, control, and a false sense of superiority. She met him at a charity gala Jessica sponsored, where she posed as an event planner. The moment their eyes met, she saw a weakness, the kind she could exploit. She began by praising him endlessly, telling him he was too smart to be overshadowed by a woman. Those words melted into his ego like honey on fire. Soon, David started confiding in her, his frustration, his insecurities, his anger. Susan pretended to understand, while secretly plotting something far darker. Within weeks, she became his obsession. He started sneaking around to meet her, always telling Jessica he was handling new investments. Susan's manipulation was masterful. She made him believe he was trapped in a marriage that stole his identity. She planted the idea that Jessica's fortune rightfully belonged to him, because a man should never live under a woman's wealth. That thought consumed him day and night. What began as infatuation soon grew into conspiracy. And Susan, smiling in the shadows, knew she had found her ticket to endless riches. If only Jessica Tyler were out of the way. Jessica began noticing the silence between them. David stopped talking during breakfast, and their laughter vanished like a candle snuffed out. His eyes held secrets she couldn't decode, and his phone never left his hand. She would walk into a room, and he'd end a call abruptly. Even their bed felt colder, his back always turned away. Still, Jessica didn't accuse. She tried to understand. She planned vacations to rekindle their bond, but he always declined with vague excuses. "I'm busy," he'd say, and his tone was no longer the voice of a husband, but a stranger she had once known. One night, Jessica stood outside his office door and overheard him on the phone, whispering, "I can't wait until this is over." I'll finally be free. Those words pierced her heart, yet she told herself she might have misunderstood. But deep down, her intuition screamed the truth. The man she sacrificed her world for was slowly turning into her worst mistake. And though she didn't know it yet, her heartbreak was about to deepen, because the woman he spoke to that night wasn't a business partner. It was Susan. David's mind was now a battlefield of greed and guilt. Susan's manipulation worked perfectly. She dangled dreams of wealth and freedom before him, making him believe Jessica's death would be the key to his new life. "You deserve more," she whispered one night as they lay together in a dimly lit hotel room. "She'll never hand it over willingly. You have to take it." David hesitated at first, but his desire to live rich without Jessica's shadow was stronger than his conscience. Slowly, his heart hardened. He convinced himself that Jessica never truly loved him, that she married and controlled him, a lie Susan repeated until it became his truth. He began researching ways to make it look natural. A slow poison in her tea, an accidental fall. He entertained every dark idea Susan fed him, not realizing she planned to betray him the moment he succeeded. The mechanic who once smiled with oil-stained hands was now a murderer in thought. He had no idea that his wife, the one he planned to destroy, would outsmart them both in ways they never imagined. Jessica's day began like any other, until she forgot her tablet at home. She returned quietly, stepping into the living room just in time to hear her husband's voice from the balcony. At first, she thought he was on a business call, but her blood froze when she heard her name. "Tomorrow night," David said coldly. "I'll mix it in her drink. Once she's gone, I'll claim the will. You'll get your share, Susan." Jessica's knees weakened, and her hand trembled so violently that her keys fell to the floor. She clasped her mouth to stop a cry. Every word sliced through her heart like glass. The man she loved, the man she trusted with everything, plotting her death. Tears burned down her cheeks, but she didn't erupt. She hid behind the wall and listened as Susan laughed softly, promising him a future together. That was the moment Jessica's soul shattered. Yet amid the pain, a cold clarity settled in her mind. She would not die for them, but they would believe she did. From that instant, Jessica stopped being the victim and became the architect of her own revenge. That night, Jessica didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, every heartbeat echoing the betrayal she had just heard. Her tears dried into strength. She knew confronting David would only hasten her end, so she decided to give him exactly what he wanted: her death. The next morning, she visited a private doctor, Dr. Leonard Price, a trusted friend who had once treated her mother. After hours of explaining and pleading, he agreed to help her fake her death. He gave her a rare medical compound that could induce a coma-like state for several hours, slowing her pulse to a faint rhythm. "It will make you appear dead," he said gravely. "But you must be careful. One mistake, and it could become real." Jessica nodded. She planned every detail: her poisoned drink, the timing, and even her will. It was the hardest decision of her life, but she knew there was no other way. If she survived quietly, she could expose both David and Susan with irrefutable proof. Her heart still loved him, but that love had now turned into steel. Her silence became her weapon. It was a quiet evening. Jessica sat at the dining table with David, pretending not to notice his unease. He poured her favorite wine and smiled awkwardly, his trembling hands betraying his calm. Jessica played her part perfectly: soft laughter, gentle conversation, a kiss on his cheek. When he turned his back to check the oven, she saw the small vial he had been hiding in his pocket. Her heart sank, but her face stayed serene. As he poured the wine, she subtly switched glasses when he looked away. She raised a glass to her lips, pretending to sip, but never swallowed. Instead, she reached for the vial from her pocket, Dr. Price's chemical compound. "To us," she said with a sad smile, before drinking it all. Within seconds, her vision blurred, her heartbeat slowed, and darkness swallowed her whole. David's face was the last thing she saw, not as a husband, but as a stranger watching her die. He fell to his knees, feigning shock, but deep down, he felt relief. He thought he had won. He didn't know Jessica's death was an illusion crafted to destroy him. The city mourned. News headlines read, "Billionaire Jessica Tyler dies unexpectedly." David played the role of the grieving widower so convincingly that even her closest employees pitied him. Cameras captured his tears at the lavish funeral he personally organized, or rather, exploited. He wore black, spoke of her kindness, and even laid a single white rose on her coffin, whispering, "Rest now, my love, for the world to see." But inside, he was celebrating. He had already started planning his new life with Susan, the woman who promised him everything. Yet, unknown to him, Jessica's coffin contained a body prepared by her doctor, a carefully staged deception. Miles away, in a quiet countryside cottage, Jessica lay under medical supervision, slowly regaining consciousness. Her first breath after death came with tears of both pain and triumph. She had buried not just her name, but the part of her that once loved blindly. Now she was reborn, as a woman ready to reclaim her power and expose the darkness that had once slept beside her. Barely a week after the funeral, Susan moved into Jessica's mansion as though she owned it. David introduced her to the staff as a close friend who'd been helping me cope, but everyone whispered behind his back. Still, Susan didn't care. She lounged in Jessica's robes, drank her wine, and even sat at her vanity mirror applying lipstick while mocking the dead woman's memory. "Imagine," she laughed one morning, "how easy it was to fool her." David chuckled nervously, though something in her tone unsettled him. She was becoming more demanding, asking for control over accounts, assets, and properties. The more she pushed, the more he realized she might not share anything once she got all. Meanwhile, letters from Jessica's lawyer began arriving, announcing the official reading of the will. David smirked, convinced he would inherit everything. "Finally," he told Susan, "it's all mine now." He had no idea that the woman he buried was watching every step in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to return, not as a victim, but as a storm. The invitation to the will reading arrived in a sleek black envelope embossed with the Tyler Holdings seal. David opened it with trembling hands, his eyes gleaming as he read the details. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Tyler & Associates Law Firm," it said. His heart raced. This was the day he'd been waiting for. He spent the night celebrating with Susan, their laughter echoing through Jessica's mansion like an insult to her memory. "Soon, we'll be unstoppable," Susan whispered, clinking glasses with him. Yet somewhere in the back of his mind, guilt flickered like a candle in the dark. He brushed it off with more champagne, convincing himself that Jessica's wealth was now his destiny. Meanwhile, in the shadows of London, Jessica watched everything unfold through her lawyer and loyal assistant Grace. Every move David made was recorded. Every word Susan uttered was documented. Jessica smiled faintly as she saw her husband's arrogance grow. "Tomorrow," she whispered to herself, "tomorrow they meet their ghosts." The world thought she was dead, and that was precisely how she intended to shock them. David arrived at the law firm in a tailored black suit, pretending to mourn. The staff greeted him respectfully, unaware of the deceit buried beneath his charm. Susan walked beside him, dressed in black lace and diamonds, pretending to be a supportive friend. Cameras flashed as reporters gathered outside. Billionaire widows were to be read today. The attention thrilled Susan. She loved the glamour that came with the scandal. David placed a hand on her back, playing the perfect grieving husband. Inside, the air was cold and silent. The attorney, Mr. Collins, adjusted his glasses as he welcomed them. A few of Jessica's board members were present, faces solemn. "We will begin shortly," Mr. Collins said, motioning for everyone to take their seats. David smiled faintly, whispering to Susan, "By this time tomorrow, we'll be untouchable." Susan's painted lips curled into a smirk. What neither of them knew was that the woman whose fortune they plotted to steal was already inside the building, alive, waiting for the curtain to fall. Mr. Collins opened the sealed envelope containing Jessica's last will and testament. The room fell into an uneasy silence. "This document," he began, "was signed by Mrs. Jessica Tyler 2 weeks before her death." David straightened, excitement glinting in his eyes. Susan squeezed his hand under the table. "To my husband, David Timothy," the lawyer read, "I leave control of all non-core business assets, conditional upon a personal note attached herein." A murmur swept through the room. David's face lit up. "Conditional?" he thought, dismissing it as formal wording. The lawyer continued, "To my staff, who stood by me through every storm, I grant lifelong pensions. To my charitable foundations, I dedicate half of my personal fortune." David's smile faltered slightly. "Half?" But before he could process it, Mr. Collins paused. "Now," he said gravely, "the final note from Mrs. Tyler, to be read aloud in her absence." He opened a smaller envelope and took out a handwritten letter sealed with Jessica's personal crest. The handwriting was elegant, confident, unmistakably hers. David leaned forward, his pulse quickening, unaware that his world was about to collapse. Mr. Collins cleared his throat and began reading Jessica's note. To my dear husband, David Timothy, if you are hearing this, it means you have chosen greed over love. The words froze him in place. The room grew eerily silent. I married you believing that purity still existed in this world. The letter continued. But I was wrong. You betrayed not only me, but the very heart that lifted you from the dirt you came from. Gasps rippled across the table. David's face drained of color. You planned my death, the letter went on, and I allowed it because sometimes, to reveal the truth, one must play dead. Susan's hand slipped from his. Her eyes widened in disbelief. What is this? She whispered. Mr. Collins kept reading. By the time this letter is read, evidence of your conspiracy with one Susan Mendez has been handed to the authorities. And if you think I'm gone, you're wrong, because I am watching. A chill spread through the room. The lawyer looked up, confusion flickering in his gaze. There's a final instruction, he said, to play the attached video. He turned the screen toward the table and pressed play. The screen flickered to life, and there she was, Jessica Tyler, alive, sitting in a white blazer before a camera. The room erupted in gasps. David stumbled backward, gripping the chair for balance. Hello, David. Jessica's recorded voice said softly. Surprise? Her calm smile was colder than ice. You thought you poisoned me, but I simply let you believe that. You see, I overheard everything, your calls, your plans, your affair. I drank a compound that slowed my heart long enough for you to think I was gone. I wanted to see how far you would go, and you didn't disappoint. Tears filled her eyes, but her voice remained firm. Susan, you played your role well. But every message, every bank transfer, every phone call, all recorded. The police already have them. Susan shook her head violently, whispering, No, this can't be real. But it was. The lawyer paused the video and nodded toward the door. At that very moment, the heavy oak doors opened, and Jessica herself walked in, alive, radiant, and unshaken. Every jaw dropped. The reporters outside caught wind of the chaos, rushing into the hall as cameras flashed wildly. Jessica stood tall, her presence commanding the room like a queen returning to her throne, dressed in white. Her dark skin glowed under the light, her expression calm but resolute. David's knees buckled. Jessica, he gasped, voice trembling. You're alive? She interrupted coolly. Yes, David, very much alive. Death refused to take me before justice was served. Susan clutched her handbag like it could save her, eyes darting for an exit. But Jessica raised a hand. Don't bother, Susan. The police are already outside. David fell to his knees, tears streaming. Jessica, please, I didn't mean to. She cut him off sharply. You meant every word, David. You and your mistress conspired to kill me for wealth you never earned. I gave you love, and you repaid me with betrayal. Her words struck harder than any slap could. The room was silent, except for the sound of camera shutters capturing the downfall of a man who once thought he'd won. Moments later, 2 police officers entered the room. David Timothy, Susan Mendez, you are both under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. The officers read their rights as the room watched in stunned silence. Susan screamed, struggling as her handcuffs clicked into place. You can't do this to me, she cried. Jessica's gaze was steel. I didn't do anything. Susan, you did. David didn't fight. He looked broken, a shadow of the man he used to be. I loved you once, he whispered, eyes glistening. No, Jessica said quietly. You loved what I had. As they were led away, Jessica turned to the lawyer. Proceed with the remaining clauses, she said calmly. Her voice no longer trembled. It carried authority and finality. For the first time, she wasn't the woman betrayed. She was the woman who had survived and conquered. The news spread like wildfire. Billionaire Jessica Tyler returns from the dead, exposes husband and mistress for attempted murder. London's media exploded with headlines. TV stations replayed the footage of the reading over and over. David's pale face, Susan's panic, and Jessica's calm reappearance. Her name trended globally, but this time not for her wealth, for her resilience. Business partners hailed her as the smartest woman alive, while others called her the woman who fooled death. At a press conference days later, Jessica stood before a crowd of journalists. "What happened to me wasn't tragedy," she said firmly. "It was revelation. I learned that love without loyalty is poison, and sometimes the ones you save are the ones who drown you." Her words echoed through the hall, earning thunderous applause. She smiled faintly, knowing her empire and dignity had been restored. The world had seen her fall, now it would see her rise. Weeks passed. Jessica visited her old mansion, now eerily silent without David or Susan. She walked through the halls slowly, remembering the laughter, the dinners, the trust that once filled the rooms. It hurt, but it didn't break her. She had learned that love, when misplaced, becomes a weapon against the heart. Yet she also knew her pain had given her wisdom money couldn't buy. She sold the mansion, donating half of the proceeds to the same orphanage she once supported, and moved into a quieter home by the Thames. One evening, as she watched the sunset, Grace brought her a folder. Inside were the final legal documents. David and Susan sentenced to 15 years in prison. Jessica stared at their mugshots, her expression unreadable. Then she whispered, "May they learn what loyalty means." She closed the file, feeling no hatred, only peace. The chapter that nearly ended her life had finally closed. Months later, Jessica Tyler walked into the Tyler Holdings headquarters again, this time not as a victim, but as a legend. The board members stood and applauded as she entered the room. "Welcome back, Mrs. Tyler," they said. She smiled gracefully. "I never left. I only took time to see who truly belonged by my side." The company thrived again under her leadership, stronger and wiser. She founded a new foundation called the Phoenix Trust, dedicated to helping women escape toxic relationships and rebuild their lives. That evening, she looked out from her office window at the glowing city below. "I died once," she whispered, "but I came back stronger." Her reflection smiled back at her, calm, proud, and unbroken. Jessica Tyler had lost everything once to love, but gained everything back through strength. And as the nightlight shimmered across London, she knew one truth. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply surviving beautifully. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.